Today we have a really jam-packed show with a lot of information. We're going to be talking about how to upgrade some of that old vintage equipment and talk about some of the do's and don'ts and some of the safety issues in doing those upgrades. Also, we've got a great segment today on leadership and hiring and firing employees and creating an environment that help you build a team and build more loyal employees and some of the do's and don'ts there. And we also have some of the things for the procedures that I set up over the years that cut down the number of mistakes we were having, which means no wasted money, and a better way to send new people on errands to make sure they come back with exactly what you need. And we're going to be discussing all of that in today's show, and we're going to get started with that right now.
What a great song. I love that song. Respect the people that built this country. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to I Love My Tools, the radio show. It is my pleasure to be your host this evening. I am Mike DeZino, also known as America's Blind Tradesman. If you go on over to ilovemytools.com and look at some of my videos, we can prove that to you. Thank you for joining us this evening as we celebrate the most important people in the United States of America, and that is the workers, the tradespeople who built this country and who keep it running, sometimes against all odds, the way things have been going lately. This is your show, and by your questions and your input to me, you let me know what's on your mind, what's important to you, and what information you're hoping I could dig up for you that could help you do a better job, because most tradespeople are about making it better, not making it worse. Over the years, rarely did I see a real tradesperson go to work with the thought in mind, by the time the end of the day came, things would be worse off rather than better off. Unless, of course, you're in demolition. Okay, maybe that's the time you would have that exception. So myself and our guests from time to time that we bring on, and other callers and other input we get from other sources, we're going to get that information over to you that'll help you secure your part of the great American dream. We're also going to be discussing the issues that are important to the majority of working Americans. I say that word working. Yeah. Do I sound judgmental? You bet I do. I don't intend to be politically correct. This is one show. This is tradespeople, and anybody who's ever been in the trades, as I have been most of my working career. Matter of fact, come to think of, my first job was in the trades too, in the printing business and stuff, working in the paper handlers union and the printing trades and the dock workers union and stuff on the loading docks and stuff. So I've always been in the trades, and I will tell you, working, who cares what non-working people think? Really irrelevant to the subject at hand, because the working people are the ones who carry all of this society on their back. So whose opinion should you be listening to when the people are telling you what they need so they can do a better job? So we're going to be discussing a lot of hard topics here. I hate getting political. There's enough of that on other stations and everything else. But at some point it does overlap into your work career, because you know what you need to do your job. And those of you that have companies where you hire tradespeople, and those of you who have to hire tradespeople for services to render to you, you know what I'm talking about. This is not some dirty little secret that we're going to just sweep under the rug here. There is a serious side to life in the trades, and there's also a very much fun side to the culture, which we are also going to do here, because I'm sure you folks out there, and I know I have, seen some stuff that you just shake your head or fall on the ground laughing because you can't believe you just saw what you just saw or heard what you just heard. And we'll be sharing those kind of stories here too. The trades are a good life. And that's why I say the great equalizer and the fairest place to be in America today are the trades. Because if you've got the skill and you've got the work ethic, you're hired. That's it. There's some people who, will hold certain things against you, but I'm telling you, if they've got enough work, their need to put you to work is greater than their need to exclude you, hate you, discriminate against you, or whatever. I know it from my own personal case, being blind. The trades have been really good to me, especially when you consider that most blind people in the United States, I believe it's 75%, are unemployed during good times, and I've earned a great living in the trades. In fact, let me just give you some stats about the trades. I do this every show, and I'm going to do it here because it only takes 30 seconds. If you go into the trades at age 18 and you leave the trades after 50 years, which is retirement age now is 68, you will earn more money in your lifetime. Hear this out. The majority of the people who go into the trades will earn more money in their lifetime than most of the people who go to college. The actual stats are about 26% of the American public gets to go to college. Half of them never even get a degree. They never even graduate. But they still have the debt, so they have something to show for their years in college. It wasn't a total loss, right? Yeah, they have the student loan debt. Of the remaining half that graduate, 92% of them can't find a job in the field of discipline that little piece of paper hanging on their wall or stuffed in a drawer somewhere tells the world they're qualified to work in. That's sad. That is really sad. Now, I'm not against college. I went to college. Okay, I was a physics major, physics and mathematics, double major. But I'll tell you, the trades is where I was happiest, and the trades are what were my calling in life. And I would say it's a calling. I would say anything that you do that you love to do and that you do well is a calling. It's really not a job. And because of that, I would strongly suggest expand your children's mind. You parents and grandparents out there, find out if that grandson or son or daughter of yours is cut out to be in the trades. They might have some natural talents where they get to use their brain and their hands. You know, idle hands are the devil's workshop, as they used to say when we were kids. Well, you know what? Next holiday, birthday, Christmas, whatever comes up, put some tools into those kids' hands and see what they do with them. See if that's where they're really meant to be in life, instead of telling them they're going to go to college and be just one more of the unemployed. If you have any opinions contrary to mine, you can join us on the air when we're live like this. You can find that information up on the website at AmericanPatriotRadio.com. For those of you that don't know what this show is all about, there's details and description up there for you. Also, if you want to tell a friend about the show. So give us a call. Let us know what's on your mind. And, of course, we're going to also encourage you to send questions to questions@ilovemytools.com, comments at ilovemytools.com, or something that I've noticed that some of you do. You go on over to I Love My Tools, or you go over to American Patriot Radio, or you go up to YouTube where some of the videos and stuff are, and you're leaving me comments there with questions, and we're going to address some of those tonight, actually. So that was kind of exciting. So you folks are, keeping me pretty busy hopping around from all this social media stuff. Stuff comes in on Facebook, stuff comes in over at Twitter and stuff. So it's kind of cool. It's really cool, and we enjoy that. But I got to tell you something that happened this week that we think is pretty significant. A few days ago, we launched our app library for ilovemytools.com. And you can get to that by simply going to ilovemytools.com. These are free of charge, and they're a lot of fun. And they are called, Are You Smarter Than a Blind Tradesman? Yeah, I know. We're going to take a lot of heat for that. Look, I'm making fun of myself, okay? There's a series of quizzes in several different disciplines, all of which I have worked in. Some is general handy, some is carpentry, plumbing, electrical, and automotive and stuff. And I've worked in a number of different trades in my life, and I love them all. And so these questions come from my experience. And for those of you that score well on those, you become a member of our elite 100%ers club. There's 10 questions to a quiz, so it's easy to get 10 right in a row. That's not that hard, especially if you have any experience in the disciplines. And some of you who don't think you do, it might be worth your while to take the quizzes, and you'd be surprised that you already know 50, 60, 70% of the information that a tradesperson would know about that same category. So that's kind of exciting. That'd be a fun thing for you to do, to head on over there and just enjoy that and have some fun. Those of you that get good scores, post them up at your Facebook, or even bad scores. Have some fun. Let your friends pick on you. It'll encourage your friends to see if they can beat your score. Join the crew over there. So go on over there and go to ilovemytools.com and take one of the quizzes. Take a couple. They're fun. You'll enjoy them. Some of the responses on the questions are not politically correct, but we don't care. If anybody ever has worked in any trades on a job site, political correctness is the last goal of the day, okay? The game is have fun, get it done. That's the game. So enjoy the quizzes. We had a lot of fun putting them together for you, and we've got other stuff like that coming up. And also there's a section over there called Mike's 411-911 Discoveries. We post things in there that members of the crew can have access to because it's things that I have discovered that are very helpful. There's lots of free stuff out there, and there's lots of smart things to do, and we've got that for you also. Okay, tonight's show, we're going to get into the questions and answer some of the people's questions. We've got questions on how do you upgrade machinery to larger capacity, older machinery, and discuss the improvements to old equipment. Hiring and firing help. Yeah, for those of you in the trades, you do reach a point where you're not a lone wolf anymore, and maybe you need a helper or a couple of helpers. How do you do that? Also, setting up simple internal systems so your help can win. Because I'll tell you, if you've been in the trades at all or you've seen what goes on out there, you want to smack yourself in the head and do that Italian thing with the palm on the forehead. Hang on. Before we get the cards and letters coming in and the hate mail, my heritage is Italian-American. So we were told as little kids, if you didn't want to be bald in the front like Uncle Tony, you had to stop doing that because that's why he was bald in the front. He beat his hair right off his forehead and drove it to the back of his head. That's what we were told that did. Hiring and firing help and creating simple systems so that your people can win. Also, we're going to be sharing some very key leadership principles, how to build a strong crew to how to build a strong business once you know how to build strong crews. And we're going to have a lot more coming up for you here tonight. Let me just address one of the questions from the listeners here. I've got a couple of minutes here before the break, and let me just share this. I'm assuming this is a gal. Her name is Heidi. Her last name begins with an L. Heidi, hello. She purchased a vintage Rockwell 9-inch table saw and wanted to know if there was any way to upgrade that to put a 10-inch blade in there. And I wish Heidi would call in or communicate back to me in more detail because she saw my video up at ilovemytools.com, the Still 10 Fingers video, where I'm showing my old vintage, it's got to be 75 or 80 years old now. I bought it when it was probably 40 years old. Rockwell table saw. It's a 10-inch, and it's a 3-belt system, and it's an unstoppable machine. I mean, you just push 4x4s through it. Lots of power. It's still good over the years. The only thing I ever had to do with it, probably about 30 years ago, I put a new set of bearings on the arbor. And other than that, I've hardly done anything to it other than keep it clean, keep it waxed and lubricated and clean. There's not much more to it. It's just a solid old piece of machinery. Well, on the post in the video, I had mentioned a website you could go to called vintagemachinery.org. And there's all kinds of stuff there, including manuals for this stuff and parts and swaps and recommendations where to find parts to rebuild this machinery. And there's a whole subculture in our country of people who find these things in junkyards and in warehouses and in barns and basements and attics and garages, and they're just dragging it home and cleaning it up and putting it back into service again. And along with that goes a couple of do's and don'ts, because some of this machinery was made before the days of a lot of the OSHA requirements and safety requirements and doesn't have guards on it, and some other issues with the electrical wiring in them and a few things like that. Before I get into that topic, because that's going to take a little bit to cover, why don't we just go on over and celebrate the hardworking men and women of America? Let's hear from Alan Jackson next, and then after that we'll get into what to watch out for when you're upgrading and restoring this machinery.
Hey, you are listening to I Love My Tools, the radio show, with your show host, Mike DeZinno, America's Blind Tradesman. And now back to the show.
All right, there you go. Thank you, Alan, for adding the word woman. Today, earlier, when I was listening to the song, deciding to put it into rotation on the show tonight, working man, working man, working man, working man, and I'm going, heck, almost 40 years ago, I had women on the crew, skilled tradeswomen. And then at the end there, he redeemed himself by saying women, because there are those women out there who work the trades also. Heidi, about your blade size, let's address that, okay, before we move on here, because if I get going on another train of thought that's politically incorrect, who knows when I'll come back to your question. You want to go from a 9-inch blade to a 10-inch blade. Here's the main problem with that. A couple of things. One is I've gone down in blade size for specific reasons. To go up like that, you actually decrease the horsepower of your machine because the larger diameter blade has a counter torque requirement that actually is if you just reduced your motor by about 11 or 12% in horsepower. The other issues are the arbor bearings, and internally inside the saw, if your Rockwell or Delta is similar to most table saws, the blade sits in a half shell inside the machine, and that half shell forms basically the wind tunnel. So the sawdust gets ejected and thrown down into the bottom of the machine, and that may restrict you for size because you may not be able to put a bigger size blade, even if the arbors would be the same. Typically 5/8 of an inch is a standard arbor on most of this machinery. I've seen table saws with smaller arbors, but that was years and years ago. But so you're probably running a 5/8 arbor, but again, that blade, you'd have to modify all that sheet metal that's in there. And now you're messing with the way it ejects sawdust and everything else, and I'm not sure you want to do that to your equipment. The other thing is, even with a 10-inch blade, you are not going to be able to cut like a 4x4 in half in one shot. You'll almost do it, but not quite. You'll get about 3¼ inches up into the 3½, and you're still going to have to cut that other part. So for reasons of safety and the reasons of control and everything, like if you wanted to rip a 4x4, you're probably better off just bringing the blade up to 1¾ inch to 2 inches high and flipping it over and ripping out the other half. Again, there it comes down to how good is your rip guide, how stable it is, and how good you are at pushing material straight through, and is your blade square to the table? Is your blade perfectly plumb and square to the table so that when you flip over like that, you're cutting exactly in the same place so that when it's done, there's no overlap marks. You actually have got a perfect cut within 1,000, 2,000, 3,000ths of an inch of meeting the same common point on the new face that you just ripped. I have gone smaller with blades. That I've done to increase the horsepower of my machine because, see, to take a 10 and drop it to an 8, that's the equivalent of a 20% increase in horsepower because of the fact that there's less counter torque to the blade when you're plowing into a tough material. Now, when I say a tough material, let me explain what I mean by that. Some stuff is just harder to cut, especially some of these new laminates and things with plastic in them and everything else. They create a lot of friction on the blade. So sometimes you want the additional horsepower. The best way to understand what counter torque is, it's like having a screwdriver with a big handle and having the same size screwdriver with a small handle. One just requires a heck of a lot more force to turn the screw. Well, the same is true. The larger that blade is, the less force the motor has against it. The smaller, the stronger the motor can be. And so that's an important feature. The other thing is to note is that you won't cut any faster with a larger blade. Certain materials require like a 40-tooth blade or an 80-tooth blade or a 60-tooth blade. Well, 60 teeth per rotation is 60 teeth per rotation. So if you're working with an 8-inch blade with 60 teeth or a 9-inch blade or a 10-inch blade, you're still cutting just as fast because you're still getting the same number of teeth per minute hitting your work and chunking out your sawdust or cutting your kerf. And so that's why you probably wouldn't gain a heck of a lot. And besides, you got a great 9-inch machine, and you will find probably, I would dare say, 95% of the time, anything you would care to cut, that 9-inch machine would more than meet your needs. And I want to wish you a lot of years of safe use of that machine and a lot of fun projects I hope you're able to knock out, because it sounds like you found yourself something really decent and something valuable. While we're talking about that, on these older machines, a lot of them come from the days before there was a lot of the electrical code where you needed grounding. And some of these machines are not properly grounded. If you have some electrical skill, that's not a big deal to do. You can just go to a 2-lead with a ground, and you can ground your machinery. That's an important thing to do, especially if some of this older machinery is running on 220. You're going to want to have a safety ground on it, just in case something shorts out in there. You don't want to be the path to ground when you're working on that machine. That's an easy enough thing to do. If you're not comfortable with it, I'm sure any electrician would know exactly how to ground your machine and set it up so that it was safe electrically. Like I say, a lot of these machines were pre-OSHA, pre-safety regulations, pre-mega lawsuits and all that. So guards and blades and protective gear and grounding and all of that kind of stuff is not part of usually these kinds of machines. You do have to kind of go dig out one of the old manuals. That's why I recommend vintagemachinery.org. Go there and see if you can find an old manual for your machine, see what they recommend, and then above and beyond that, you've been around a while, start using some common sense. First thing you want to do is make sure you never put your fingers in the business end of any machine, because I don't know any manual that'll protect you from that stupidity. So don't do that, okay? Reminds me in the 50s when they were building the interstate highway system, some of the blasting and stuff that went around the country, blasting caps would be left on the job sites. And of course, us kids, we're curious. We go down and see where they were cutting the road through the mountain and everything up in Connecticut, through the foothills of the Berkshires and stuff. And of course, that state's a lot of granite and rock and everything else. And we'd find blasting caps. And I remember Willie Mays did a public service message on TV that you'd see on your stations telling kids to not pick up the blasting caps. If you see a blasting cap, go get yourself a police officer or whatever, somebody, and tell them about it, but don't you touch it. And he kept repeating, don't you touch it. There were a lot of kids that actually lost hands and stuff, lost fingers, because the blasting cap went off in their hand. Some were even blinded. So you got to be careful with that kind of stuff. Be careful with some of this older machinery. You might even make some of your own guards and stuff. There's ways of doing that. Let me just go over here to my notes here, and yep, that's it. I think I covered that there, Heidi. If there's any additional information you want, please just feel free to contact us at questions@ilovemytools.com, or do what you did and leave a comment over at the I Love My Tools website and any of the posts over there regarding any of this machinery. And again, we could recommend that you go over there to check out some of the other videos. We're putting more stuff up. Now, here's another thing.
Mike?
Yes?
Also, another heads up. One of the things I discovered over the years working with very large table saws and equipment, your surface is very important, your table area. And you talk about keeping it clean and stuff. As a trick I was taught to use, and I'm not sure if you use the same or you utilize something different, especially with it being a used unit or an older unit, you want to make sure you treat that surface. One of the things we used to use, and we would use this constantly. Anytime we were done with that machine, the table got wiped down and was sprayed with Pledge furniture polish. That's what we sprayed on our steel table to keep it nice and smooth and silky, slippery, so you never had to worry about, anything getting bound up, or causing you, your project to have in the trouble. And for reconditioning an older top, we used to use off the bat, make sure it was cleaned out and blown out the best we could first. And, because we're talking big, heavy steel tables, the lemon oil kind of conditioner, like you'd use on your old cabinets back in the day. Your mother would, lemon oil her cabinets, her wood cabinets, and we would use that to bring back an old surface.
Here's what my notes say that I was about to jump to, okay, on this subject. What we did and what I was trained to do by the guy that owned this saw for 40 years before he sold it to me. He was the head mill man at a lumber yard. He was in charge of the mill department. We would clean the surface really well, and I was taught to use steel wool and something that you could use as a vehicle, like silicone spray or some type of a light, thin oil, very thin, that you could use to float debris off, something like a 3-in-1 oil, very light. For that matter, you could probably use olive oil or salad oil, and then use a circular motion. And we used to even use a 200 grit emery or steel wool to clean them, to get really disgusting messes off of them. But once we got it clean, we wipe it all down. We clean it off real good with alcohol, get the oil off and everything, get the alcohol off, and then we would use butcher's wax, or I used to like to use the turtle wax that you used to use on cars. I put on 5 or 6 coats of that over a couple of days and let it dry and really buff it in nice. To this day, people want to know, where did I get the new top on my saw? And this thing is almost 80 years old, and it still shines because the wax will go into the pores, because the tops of these machines are cast metal, and they are porous, just like cast iron would be. So you want to start filling in those pores. And the other thing is, once I did that, for routine maintenance between uses, I'll just clean it up. I use food-grade silicone, which means it has no oil in it, and you can get it at a hardware store, and it's safe to use on equipment around where you would use food. And it's also a great lubricant, by the way. Food grade silicone comes with them little mosquito thingies that you can plug into the top. It's great in your house when you have squeaky hinges because it's not oily. So if you miss the hinge, it gets them on the door jamb. You don't have to worry about it marking up the door jamb. The other thing is, if you do spray it and get it on the floor, get a sponge or something, a wet sponge, and wipe it up because it will make linoleum darn slippery. I remember one time in a printing plant where I was, we had a can of silicone spray hit the floor and somebody crushed it and the can basically blew open. And it was so funny because in the area where they did that for the next 3 months, forklifts couldn't drive through there. They'd get halfway across that alley and they'd start spinning their wheels and just sit there because silicone's great stuff. So we used to use silicone, Dave. I've never tried the pledge thing or the lemon oil. One thing I would tell folks, whatever you use to lubricate your saw, if you're doing woodwork where you're cutting fine woods and your goal is going to be to finish them after you cut them, don't use anything oily because the wood will pick it up and then you'll have trouble staining or finishing that stuff. You want stuff that's non-oily by nature.
That's why we always use the Pledge furniture polish because it's a non-oily substance.
Actually, Pledge polish is just a spray lacquer. Actually, it's a spray-on fingernail polish. Yeah.
Right. So there was nothing to worry about with wood because that's what we used to make was fine furniture with it. And as another trick, because he was a diehard with this, he was like you with your tools. You know, everything in that shop was at least 100 years old, but you couldn't tell it. You would think it was just came out of a showroom somewhere. And that includes his hand tools. Anything, any tool, it didn't matter. At the end of the day, whether it was a screwdriver, a pair of pliers, it did not matter. It better have been sprayed down with the Pledge spray. And in this way, God forbid somebody left something on the job or somebody, or if there was a leak in the roof or something in one of the storage rooms or whatever, you can take those tools after it's been done a couple of times. You can take those tools, put them in a bucket of water and leave it for a year and it still wouldn't rust. It literally prevents rust of any kind forming on anything. And yeah, he was an old fart, diehard, and everything had to be covered in Pledge. That was his secret weapon of the day.
It sounds cool. I know, too, sometimes you work outside and it's a misty day. It's not really raining, but the air's real thick and wet and misty. One of the other tricks we used to do was spray all your tools down, like I say, with the food-grade silicone, and just open the lid of your toolbox and just spray in there at random, close the lid, and create a silicone environment because silicone will drive moisture away. That's one of the old mechanics tricks, how we used to fix a wet distributor cap back in the day. When a car wouldn't start because the distributor cap was wet, we could take off the cap, spray the inside, and spray the rotor, and spray the cap and everything else, and wires and everything, because silicone will drive water out. It'll drive moisture out. So there's a number of ways to do this, and it's all pretty good. Geez, a whole topic on that. I didn't even expect we would get into it that much, but that's great, Dave. I'm going to have to try that Pledge thing. I pledge to you, I'll use Pledge, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, it blew my mind. I didn't think it was going to work. I'm like, what do I thought this guy was totally off his rock. Because I was a young kid when I started in trade. I started when I was 14. So you get these old farts. And, of course, as a teenager, you think you know everything in the world, typical teenager. And, you see these old farts that are 80, 90 years old still doing this, this type of work, and you're looking at them like these guys are just stuck in the Stone Age. What are they talking about? They don't know nothing. And then all of a sudden you realize you shut your mouth and you absorb everything.
These guys learned it from somebody who taught it to them. A lot of the stuff we learn in the trades through the apprenticeship programs go back 5,000 years ago, a lot of this stuff. It's ancient wisdom that humanity has learned. You got to take care of those tools. And speaking of taking care of those tools, let's do something here. Let's kind of remember Merle Haggard, who just passed a few weeks ago, because if you let your tools down, your tools will let you down, and you'll end up with the working man blues.
You are listening to I Love My Tools, the radio show, with your show host, Mike DeZinno, America's Blind Tradesman. And now, let's continue with the show.
The great Merle Haggard. Thank you, Merle. Thank you very, very much for that. Somebody asked me a question, and there was a lot of questions on, hiring help, training help, et cetera, et cetera. I'm old school. I've always felt you can't teach what you don't know, and you can't take advantage of that which you do not know exists, okay? And so sometimes I found that I'm looking for some higher level principle, and I'm realizing that some of the basics were skipped along the way when I was training apprentices, and they tell me that's over 300 of them in my working career I've trained one way or another, for good or bad. About 20% of them are self-employed to this day, so I'm excited about that because I know what that leads to, and we'll have a section here where we talk about self-employment in the trades and come up with some more tips and suggestions. But here's a simple thing that you got to learn to do if you're in the trades, and I don't care whether you own the company, you head the crew, or you're the low man on the totem pole. One of the things you need to do, you need to start learning how to work from lists. You can never, ever write too many lists. I'm telling you, it's the secret. Now, even me, even being blind, I figured out a way years ago to work from a list because the lists get really long, and I don't care how good your memory is. If the list is 40 items and you can remember 38 of them, it's the 2 you forgot that'll jam you up tomorrow on the job. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made the list if they weren't important. It's a simple thing to say, but you wouldn't believe how many people I've seen over the years will not work from a list or will not think the job through so they could create a list the night before or over the weekend to be ready for Monday morning. You know, the Chinese used to say the dullest pencil has a better memory than the sharpest mind. Let me just share some things with you. One of the things we used to do was we used to get the new men on the crew who would not work from a list, and they were forever missing something. They would show up at the job and, oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I left my measuring tape at my cousin's. Oh, geez, I didn't bring a Phillips screwdriver. I only have a straight one, this and that. And so, give you an example. We had a very successful company that we used to do vinyl replacement windows back in the 80s. This is long before they became popular. And we had to sit there and actually hold a class on this. And the class was very simple. Okay, tomorrow morning, you're going over to Mrs. Smith's house to install the 6 windows that she purchased. What are you going to do first? Start making a list. And they would make their list, and we'd say, well, hold it. You're going to be chipping out this, breaking out old paint and putty and stuff, removing the stops and all that. You need something to put on the floor, don't you? Oh, yeah. You need a shop vac, don't you, so you can vacuum and clean up if you make a mess. Yeah, in case they don't have a vacuum cleaner. You have one in the truck. Okay, yeah. You also need to take down their curtains and shades and all that and get them out of the way, right? Well, what do you need to do to that? Well, you need a screwdriver. What kind? Straight or Phillips? You know, we would have to walk them through. You need a caulking gun. What color is the windows? What color should the caulk be? You know, you need the fiberglass insulation to stuff the weight cavities if they were the old type rope-weighted windows. What are you going to do if one of the stops breaks or something and you got to cut a new stop? Do you have any stop material in the truck? And they would go through this whole list and they'd be pretty proud of themselves. And what do they do with the old storm window? And what do they do with the broken glass if the storm window has broken glass in it? How do they handle that? And on and on and on. And then they would get all done and they were really, really, really all excited. And I said, great. Now you're going to knock on Mrs. Smith's door tomorrow morning or, Monday morning. And they go, yeah. And then she's not going to be home. She's not going to be home? Well, how would you know she's home? Add to the list. Call the customer and let them know you're coming. Now, that seems basic, but you would be surprised how many guys will drive 25 miles out of town to go do a job with no communication to the people at all, and then they're not there, or the house is locked, or they didn't leave you a key, or there's no electricity, or whatever. And you have to set up your whole job. And I'll tell you how important this is, this concept. This was taught to me by one of my mentors. Don't go to bed at night until your list for tomorrow is written and completed. And then in some cases, I used to get that list and put it all by the door in the workshop so that in the morning I could throw it all into the truck real quick and head out onto the job in 5 minutes rather than start hunting through the workshop looking for stuff. I would have it all set together, especially on Sunday evening when we were starting the week on Monday and I just want to get out the door and get to the new job and rock and roll, I taught this concept to make your list at night. Had a lady that I was coaching. She hadn't been in the workplace in many, many years, and she was divorced, mid-40 years old, kids grown up, and she was going to go out there and have to earn a living, and she lived in an expensive region of the country. and she went out looking at jobs. I had taught her to make the list the night before. Anything you're going to do. I had worked with her and helped her get a little home-based business going, and she was very successful at that. Part-time, made like $60,000 her first year in a 12 to 15-hour a week time commitment. So she was coachable. She was one of those good people you would hire because she was coachable. Matter of fact, we're going to talk about hiring people in a little bit here. And so I taught her to make the list the night before. She was interviewing for a sales job as a dental supply rep, and it was a high-paying job. It was a $85,000 a year job plus bonuses. She got hired right then and there on the first interview. The general manager of the sales force said to her, okay, let's say I hire you and you show up here Monday morning at 8:30 or 9 o'clock. What's the first thing you're going to do? She said, nothing. And he was like shocked. He said, nothing? She says, no. She said, I would have planned it all the night before. That's go time. I'd have been on the road at 8 o'clock working my list. He hired her right on the spot. She turned out that year to be one of their top national salespeople, came into the running for the top 3 salespeople for Rookie of the Year. Built a huge territory. Matter of fact, her territory within 3 years was so big they had to split it in half because she couldn't see all the clients that she groomed. But this is the power of having a list. It's a really important thing. And here's the problem. It's a really simple thing to do. And that's the problem. Because here's one of the things I've learned about people, and I've learned about life over the years. Things that are simple to do are also real easy not to do. Okay? Things that are easy to do are easy not to do. If it's simple not to do it too. And so there's a matter of discipline in it. And there are some great stuff about how you make a list, how you prioritize what's on your list and all that. And I'll share that someday. But this is just so fundamental now that I make lists for everything, and I work the list. And I'll tell you, it's a great satisfaction where at the end of the day, you can go done, 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 and you'll find stuff falls off your list, too, that you don't even need to address anymore because once you got into a situation, it either took care of itself or you realized that what you were going to do there wasn't the best thing to do, so you get it off the list real quick. So that was kind of cool. So working from a list is a real fundamental thing. It really is. You all know that you're listening to I Love My Tools, the radio show, and this is your host, Mike DeZinno. And you could see our wonderful website over at ilovemytools.com, and you can see our videos and posts and things, and we are geared toward people in the trades. If you love your tools, they'll love you back. You know, they're great things to have. And you can see the archives for past shows, and you can see the phone number that when we're on the air live like this, you can call in and chat with us. And, of course, over at I Love My Tools, I encourage you to join the crew, get plugged into what's going on for crew activities that our crew engages in, a lot of little fun things we do. And go on over to ilovemytools.com. Take some of those quizzes. Are you smarter than a blind tradesman? And take some of those quizzes and have some fun with those and treat yourself to that. If you want to send us questions, simple. You can make comments over at the website with your questions, or you could go to questions@ilovemytools.com. Send an email, rather, not go there. The box is kind of tight. It's in a computer, so you might not fit in there. Or comments@ilovemytools.com with your comments. And tell us what you're thinking, good, bad, or indifferent. Hey, we like those nasty comments because we laugh at them. We get a big kick out of them. We don't take much salt in them. But for those of you that have constructive comments or some things you'd like us to do or here on the show that you think would be of greater value to the average working person in the United States right now in the trades, we'd be glad to do that. After the top of the hour, we're going to be doing the segment Becoming Self-Employed in the Trades. And I'm going to have some comments on that about earning potential if you're going on your own rather than staying working for a company. We'll talk about Mike Rowe, the host of America's Dirtiest Jobs. What a great TV show that is. I'll tell you what I love about that show. I love Mike's sense of humor. He doesn't miss an opportunity to make a good wisecrack that you get a belly laugh out of while he's doing something really disgusting, which most of the things he does I wouldn't do for any amount of money per hour, but there are people who do it and make good money. Here's a fun one. I didn't hear this from Mike. I actually saw this. I think this was a 60-minute segment about 6-7 years ago. In Ohio, 2 engineers were laid off, a husband and wife. They were laid off, and they had nothing to do. So one day, a friend of theirs who was still working couldn't get his lawn mowed because the lawn company wouldn't cut his lawn because he had dog poop on it. He had a dog, and he was so busy to walk his dog, and he just didn't have time to pick up the dog poop to please his lawn service company. So his two unemployed engineer friends said, well, we'll go over there, and we'll do that for you. You know, they did the typical engineer thing. They went to a hardware store, and they bought pooper scoopers, and they bought buckets, and they bought plastic bags, and they bought disposable sterile gloves and all this other stuff because they engineered this to a science. So they went out there, and they were picking up their friend's lawn of poop and all that. And one of the neighbors saw them and said, hey, what do you charge? And they said, what do we charge to do what? And they said, you know, to poop or scoop a lawn like that. And they said, well, we're just helping a friend out. You know, I'd pay you if you'd come and do our lawn. And that's it. That was the minute their lives totally changed. They started a pooper scooping business. At the end of the first year, they bought themselves a van. I believe they painted it brown, and they put a slogan on the side that your number 2 is number 1 with us. And they both earned more money that year than they did when they were engineers, just pooper scooping lawns for people who didn't have the time or the inclination to do it for themselves. Within several years, I'm doing this from memory, they ended up with something like 6 or 8 trucks and like 20 people working for them, and they were making about $250,000 a year picking up dog poop. I'm telling you, you just would not believe the opportunity that is here in America for people who render services, especially a service that people want, and where you get in and you do your job and you do a good job and you get out and you get paid. It's a great life. It really is. So after the top of the hour break here coming up in a few seconds, we will get into the subject of self-employment because, you know, all of us at some point or another have considered that. In the trades anyway. I don't know about the rest of the world. But I imagine if you're a teacher, you don't think about self-employment because it's hard to start your own school system and start your own union and everything from scratch. For the people in the trades, you know, lone wolves out there, a person with a pickup truck and their tools or a van and their tools, and they're out there doing their own thing. And you know, it's the same kind of person with a company with 50 or 100 people working for them. It's a wide open, scalable kind of existence when you're in the trades because you could do it for 1, you could do it for 5, you could do it for 10, you could do it for 100. Let's just take a break right now. You are listening to I Love My Tools, the radio show with your host, Mike DeZinno, America's Blind Tradesman. We'll be back after this break.
I hope you found this video helpful, and if you'd like to see some of the other projects we'll be doing in the future, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, America's Blind Tradesman. And as always, this is Mike DeZinno, America's Blind Tradesman, saying stay safe, stay productive, and keep loving those tools. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.